This gadget that I hold in my hands is called a 20-inch lens. And in the hands of a skilled cameraman, it can bring in pictures from 500-600 yards. Most of this next report was shot by Leo Rossi and Norman Alley using this lens. They were shooting the illegal arrival in this country of hundreds of people. A lot of it was shot either at dusk or at dawn. And shooting close up on the arrival of illegal immigrants is just something that cameramen do not do. Every 30 seconds, a so-called Mexican wetback enters this country illegally. The number is increasing. Some days, as many as 5,000 are caught and sent back in a single day. We asked Jack Beck to go down from KNX in Hollywood to the border and make this report. This is the morning prison train out of Southern California into Mexico. It makes this run every day about dawn. Its cargo, Mexican wetbacks, who have sneaked across the border and are being deported. Most of them entered the United States by wading across the Rio Grande in Texas or the New River in California. Thus the term wetback. On an average day, 3,000 wets get across. Many of these cross the 1,600-mile border into Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. This report is about the traffic in the Imperial Valley of California. Here alone, the figure is 1,500 per day.
"5:30 in the morning in Calexico, Mexicali, along the international border, and the night's catch from Indio is being brought in by the Border Patrol, having just unloaded from prison cars aboard a Southern Pacific train. A group of perhaps 200 wets. Yesterday's catch, probably, from the northern portions of this Border Patrol sector, being brought down to be returned across the border through the fence."
While the government spends tens of thousands of dollars a day trying to enforce the McCarran Act in our ports on the East Coast, an efficient but small force of Border Patrol officers makes a vain attempt to control the illegal traffic on the Mexican border. The job has been compared to trying to scoop the tide off the beach and pour it back into the ocean. Some of these Mexicans have crossed the border many times this year, have ridden the train back a half dozen times. But many are never caught. Some make it to San Francisco, Chicago, and even New York. Statistics have indicated that when the traffic in wets is high, the supply of dope in our big cities increases proportionately. It's a wide-open border, and the FBI knows those who violate it are not all wetbacks or Mexicans. This is the rich Imperial Valley at El Centro. 25 years ago, there was no problem here because there was no water here, and little could be grown. Then came the Hoover Dam and the All-American Canal. Farmers say they used to pray for rain. Now they telephone for it. The water from the Colorado River flows in an endless quantity, virtually on tap. And it has transformed the Imperial Valley into a lush, fertile valley. An annual yield of $255 per acre. Everything grows here. Grapes, oranges, dates, beans, lettuce, cabbages, melons, and tomatoes. Currently, the big harvest is in carrots. Water and modern farming machines made the Imperial Valley produce. But machines can't pick these vegetables. Ancient stoop labor is still the best method. And to meet this demand for low-paid, stoop manpower, an illegal traffic in Mexican wetbacks has grown and flourished. This is the border where they cross over. On the other side of that fence is Mexico. 70,000 wetbacks in a single town waiting to come over.
It's just about 2 o'clock of a rather hot Saturday afternoon here in Calexico. What you're looking at across something called the New River is Mexicali. It's the old town in Mexicali, and it's visible from the bluff on which we're standing, looking over into Mexico. We're standing on a bluff which is approximately 100 yards from the wire fence which you see in the foreground. That wire fence is one which runs for a distance of about 5 to 6 miles on both sides of Calexico, Mexicali. Calexico, Mexicali is actually one community with a fence, the border, between it. What you're watching is a group of Wets on the Mexican side who are making preparations to come over into the United States, crossing the fence, which you see bisecting the river. A Border Patrol man will be staked out here sometimes from early in the evening until midnight, or midnight till early in the morning. But again, this is a reflection of the fact that the Border Patrol only has so many men and so many critical points to cover. Working their way out to this point that I mentioned now is a party of three, 2 men and a girl, which, from what we have been able to discover, is a rather unusual grouping, and that most, by far, of the Wets who come through are young Mexican males, and it's only very rarely that you hear of a girl being in such a party coming across. The critical point in the crossing here is that jog you see in the fence with the sign hanging up above it. And there is a slit in the fence down there, an aperture, and it's possible for them to slip through this hole in the fence. Now here comes the first member of the party that wets through. He is now on the United States soil, having just stepped through the hole in the fence that you can see in the juncture down there across the New River. We have another couple coming along now, look to be a youngster, maybe 15, 16 years old, and another woman. As you can see, the distance between the edge of the river and the fence here is very narrow, and it's necessary to cling to the fence and step along the concrete abutment which forms the foundation of the fence. Now here comes the second member of the party, a girl who was with the other 2 men. The third member of the party still remains on the Mexicali side of the border fence. The pair is inching out now, clinging to the fence. The way evidently having been established is clear, and our own intentions not related to law enforcement. 2 of the party that we watch come across the fence, a young woman, looks to be about 26 or 27 years old, in a blue dress, red sandals, with a man fairly well dressed in a business suit, gray fedora hat. Is now walking slowly into Calexico, now about 300 yards well into the United States and heading into town.
There are some 900 men charged with the protection of the 1,600-mile border. Reporter Jack Beck talks to Chief Parker.
How would you say your present activity compares with the patrol's duties of a year ago?
Well, we're running a much larger number of apprehensions per day or per month now. A year ago, I believe we ran 119,000 apprehensions in this sector.
What's it look like this year?
It looks as though at the present rate we will approach 200,000.
200,000 for this year. Well, I've noticed recently that there are reports out of Washington that a cut in the department's appropriation would eliminate the use of your aircraft. Now, what's that going to do to your operation? Will it hamper it?
Yes, it will hamper it very seriously, Jack. At least in this sector, we have found that the airplane is a means of affecting a considerable economy. For example, by the use of the plane for about an hour, we'll say, each morning, we can locate all the groups who are working, all the groups who are moving. And in that manner, we can save the work of many crews and a lot of mileage on our vehicles.
The plane they may lose works like this. The pilot is able to spot clusters of wetbacks almost as a forest ranger spots fires.
"168 calling Jeep 208. Come in, please." This is 208, go ahead. 208, 7 West, going up the west bank of the Highline Canal, about 6 miles north of your present position. 7 of them on the west bank, 6 miles north, over. 10-4.
Most of the arrests are without incident. These same Wets have been arrested several times before, probably by the same officers. There's no point in running. They can have another try at the border tomorrow. Sometimes the wetbacks travel 100 miles before they're caught. Chief Parker's men patrol the freights on horseback. Again, no violence. The two countries are very sensitive about incidents. There is no punishment for crossing the border, just deportation. Those who don't ride the rails try Highway 99, the busy turnpike of the valley. Every car coming north is checked. The suspicious ones are asked to pull over to headquarters for a further inspection.
United States Immigration Inspection. What's your nationality? Where were you born? Thank you.
Reporter Beck and cameraman Alley waited 19 hours for an incident. There was no arrest in this case. This is probably the only border in the world where if you're caught, you get only a free ride home. But the biggest percentage of the Wets are flushed out of the fields during raids. Until recently, some of the farmers worked a racket of letting the Wets get captured toward the end of their employment. Often in the excitement of a raid, they were marched off without time to be paid. Now, the Border Patrol stands by and makes the farmers pay. It must be stated that a few farmers refuse to hire Wets, but most of them do, and in doing so, reduce their labor costs by as much as 40 cents an hour. Some Wets work for less than $1 a day. Roar High Cremoyan tells why he hires Wets.
People say, why don't you get domestic labor? There isn't any domestic labor. They're not domestic labor, second generation. They're not taught to do stoop labor. They're not taught to use a hoe or a shovel. They're taught to drive automobiles and drive farm holes. And I can't do my farm labor by driving farm holes. So I have to have stoop labor Mexicans to complete my farm work. Twice I almost lost this field because of the immigration officer picking up my men 3-4 times a day. Once at 11 o'clock at night, 4:30 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, and twice between that time. I had to make I had to hire a lot of new men in order to get this field under control. People say, why don't you get nationals? I can't get national because this ground here I've leased for only 4 months. And I can't afford to spend money to build new house for the nationals. They have to have shower, running water, and housing system. This old shack here, the wet Mexicans, they came over here and fixed it up and it was livable for them. But the immigration officer came and took it up and broke the house up while I was taking them up.
My name's E.B. Farmer, and I'll tell you how this looks to me, Mr. Murrow. We need these wetbacks here to do our work for us, and they need the work. And every night you see them coming down here at 20 and 30 in a bunch. And the Wets, as a rule, I find, are better workers than the Nationals.
There is a treaty agreement by which a certain number of Mexican nationals are legally imported to do stoop labor as controlled units. This is a legal group coming in. The quota is low, and many Mexicans can't pass the physical requirements. Some of the farmers, in turn, resist the nationals because they get higher wages.
Say, how many men did you want today?
147.
What are you going to use them for today?
Vegetables.
Vegetables? What
Corn, tomatoes, beans, eggplant.
You're not getting any date men today?
No.
No. Well, go right ahead. They're all ready for you.
Oh.
This is a camp where the controlled nationals are hired, much as in a hiring hall. This is a legal operation, as contrasted to the illegal wetbacks. The farmers who use these men are permitted to select them. and there is very little risk of importing disease or narcotics. But many more wetbacks are hired. Technically, the wetbacks are subject to fine or imprisonment, but as a matter of practice, nothing happens to them. We do not have enough courts to try them or enough jails to house them.
Déjenme ver las manos otra vez. A ver, campesino. Está bueno, señor.
At the height of the wet season, the competition is so heavy that many of the local workers are forced to move north in order to keep working. The big losers, next to the nation itself, are the local farm workers. This is a meeting of Local 274.
We're not against the wetback, as you know, as a man. We're against the system that exploits it. So I want to make a series of recommendations to this board. This is what I'd like to suggest, brothers and sisters, is for every member to report all cases of farm labor contractors who are hauling illegals. We will take these reports and present them to the State Labor Commissioner in Sacramento and request him immediately to cancel the license of these contractors who are trafficking in illegals in the Imperial Valley.
That fence is the frontier between two friendly nations, surely one of the most porous frontiers in the world. This traffic in individuals is illegal. 1 out of 2 only happens to be caught and sent back. The rest of them fan out across the country. Some of them are never apprehended. This is a story that has been told nowhere so well as by Gladwin Hill of the New York Times. This is the story of a search for cheap labor, a law which is not being enforced. It is a threat to our security, perhaps to our health. It is a triumph of expedience over law, a law which perhaps should be enforced or changed. Good night and good luck.
See It Now is presented each week at this time by
We are united by our support for democracy. They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. Mexicans are just beyond reproach. They are not our friend, believe me. And they are amazing people, amazing people. They're sending people that have lots of problems. And I happen to have a tremendous feeling for Mexican Americans. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. Spectacular, spectacular, hardworking people. They're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. We did discuss the wall. We didn't discuss payment of the wall. That'll be for a later date.